I stood in our living room holding my resignation letter, my hands shaking slightly as I faced my wife Melissa and her parents. The decision had been building for months, but saying it out loud made it real. I'm done working for other people, I announced. I'm starting my own design and construction business. The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before Melissa burst into laughter. She actually pulled out her phone and started recording me. You? Start your own business? She snorted, wine glass trembling in her other hand. Jake, you can't even fix our garbage disposal without calling a plumber. Her parents joined in the laughter from the couch. Her father, Harold, shook his head with that patronizing smile I'd grown to hate over the years. That's our Jake, her mother Patricia chimed in. Always dreaming big. I folded the resignation letter calmly and slipped it into my jacket pocket. After 8 years of marriage, I should have expected this reaction. Melissa had never believed in anything I wanted to do. We'll see, I said quietly, heading toward the door. You'll come crawling back, Jake. Melissa called after me, still holding up her phone. Don't expect me to pick up the pieces when this fails. My name is Jake Monroe. Before I tell you how it all started, I have to ask you for a favor. Write in the comments where you're watching me from, and please don't forget to subscribe. What I'm about to share with you is something I never thought could happen in my own home, under my own roof, to the person I'd spent my entire life trying to protect. This is a story about trust, betrayal, and the kind of evil that hides behind a smile. That was the night I realized my marriage was over. I walked into the cold October air, threw my overnight bag into my pickup truck, and started the engine. The house behind me glowed with warm light, but it no longer felt like home. It felt like a prison I'd finally escaped. As I drove through our quiet neighborhood, past the perfectly manicured lawns and identical mailboxes, I looked down at my wedding ring. The gold band that had once symbolized love and partnership now felt like a shackle. I pulled over at a red light and slowly slid the ring off my finger. It went into my cup holder with a small clink that sounded like freedom. For the first time in months, I smiled. The memory hit me as I drove toward my friend Owen's house. 7 years ago, when Melissa was finishing graduate school and I was working double shifts at the construction company to support us both. Just one more semester, she'd said back then, curled up on our old couch with textbooks scattered around her. Then things will be easier. We'll be a real team. I'd believed her. I'd worked 60-hour weeks, skipped meals to afford her tuition, and took out loans to cover our rent. When she finally graduated with her business degree, I'd been so proud. But things never got easier. She got a job at her father's consulting firm, started wearing expensive clothes, and began talking about career advancement and networking opportunities. Somewhere along the way, she stopped saying we and started saying I. I need to focus on my career right now. I can't be held back by someone who isn't ambitious. I deserve better than this. The worst part was watching her change from the woman I'd fallen in love with into someone who looked at me like I was an embarrassment. Like loving me was something she was trying to outgrow. Tonight, when she'd laughed at my dreams, I'd finally understood that the woman I married was gone. The final straw had actually happened 3 weeks ago during dinner with her parents. We'd been sitting at their mahogany dining table, eating Patricia's famous pot roast, when Harold started his usual lecture about making something of yourself. A man's worth is measured by his paycheck, he'd said, cutting his meat with surgical precision. That's just the reality of life, Jake. I tried to contribute to the conversation, mentioning some ideas I had about sustainable building design and how the construction industry was changing. But every time I spoke, Melissa would interrupt. He's just a handyman, she'd laughed, patting my arm like I was a child. He's cute when he tries to sound business-minded. Her parents had laughed along, and I'd forced a smile while gripping my fork so hard my knuckles went white. Jake doesn't understand corporate strategy, Melissa had continued. He thinks with his hands, not his head. It's sweet, really. Sweet. Like I was a pet performing tricks. Harold had leaned over and stage whispered, maybe you should encourage him to be more realistic about his limitations. That night, I'd lain awake staring at the ceiling while Melissa slept peacefully beside me, planning my escape from a life that was slowly killing my spirit. The conversation that ended everything had happened yesterday morning over coffee. Melissa was scrolling through her phone, probably checking social media, when I'd finally worked up the courage to tell her about my plans. I've been thinking, I'd said carefully. What if I started my own construction company? I have enough experience, and there's real demand for custom sustainable building. She'd looked up from her phone with that expression she wore when I suggested things she considered beneath her. Be realistic for once, Jake, she'd said, returning to her screen. You're not CEO material. You don't have the education or the connections. Stick to what you know. And what's that? Following orders. Taking direction. You're good at that. The dismissal in her voice had cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. Maybe you should quit chasing impossible dreams and focus on getting promoted where you are, she'd continued. At least that's achievable. I'd stood up, walked to the counter, and poured the rest of my coffee down the sink. Watch me, I'd said quietly. Melissa had laughed, that same condescending laugh I'd heard last night. You'll be lucky to get a single client, Jake. Who's going to trust someone with no business experience? Packing my tools and personal belongings had taken less than an hour. 8 years of marriage, reduced to 3 boxes and a duffel bag. Melissa had sat on the couch the entire time, painting her nails and pretending I didn't exist. She hadn't asked where I was going or when I'd be back. She'd just watched me load my truck like I was a service worker she'd hired. Don't expect me to wait around for your midlife crisis to end, she'd said without looking up from her manicure. I'd taped up the last box, the one containing my drafting tools and the architectural drawings I'd been working on in secret for months. Wouldn't dream of it, I'd replied. The house had felt smaller as I walked through it one last time. The kitchen where we'd cooked together when we were young and broke. The living room where we'd planned our future. The bedroom where we'd stopped talking about dreams and started just going through the motions. None of it felt like mine anymore. At the front door, I turned back for a final look. Melissa was still on the couch, blowing on her fresh nail polish, her expensive engagement ring catching the light. Good luck, she'd said in a tone that clearly meant the opposite. I'd walked out and slammed the door behind me, not because I was angry, but because it felt like the end of a chapter. Owen Martinez had been my best friend since high school, and his garage was about to become my first office. He'd cleared out space between his workbench and his motorcycle, setting up a folding table and an old desk chair with a rip in the seat. Well, Owen said, gesturing around the cramped space, every empire starts somewhere. I laughed, looking at the flickering fluorescent light and the oil stains on the concrete floor. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Thanks for letting me crash here while I figure things out. Stay as long as you need, man. Maria's already making up the couch for you. I opened my laptop on the wobbly table and stared at the blank screen. This was it. The moment where I either proved Melissa wrong or confirmed every doubt she'd ever had about me. I created a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Monroe Design and Build. The name looked good on the screen. Professional. Real. Owen handed me a beer and sat on his workbench. So what's the plan? Start small. Custom residential projects. Focus on sustainable building practices and energy efficiency. There's a market for it, even if Melissa doesn't think so. Melissa doesn't know everything. For the first time in months, I felt hopeful about the future. The first few months were brutal. I'd sent out dozens of proposals and gotten exactly 0 responses. My savings account dwindled while I waited for callbacks that never came. I'd applied for small renovation contracts, custom deck builds, even basic handyman work. All rejected. Most nights, I ate instant noodles for dinner while working on design proposals by the light of Owen's garage fluorescents. I'd redesigned my business cards 3 times, updated my website constantly, and called every construction contact I'd made over the years. Nothing. The rejections were polite but consistent. Thank you for your interest, but we've decided to go with a more established firm. Translation: nobody wanted to take a chance on a guy working out of his friend's garage. I'd started to wonder if Melissa was right. Maybe I was delusional. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But on a Tuesday in December, when I was down to my last $100 and seriously considering calling my old boss to beg for my job back, my phone finally pinged with an email. Hello, Mr. Monroe. I found your website, and I'm interested in discussing a small bathroom renovation. Would you be available for a consultation? Eleanor Thompson. I stared at the email for a full minute before responding. My first potential client. Finally. Eleanor Thompson was a retired elementary school teacher who lived in a modest ranch house across town. She wanted to renovate her bathroom to make it more accessible as she got older. My grandson showed me your website, she explained as we walked through her house. He said you specialize in making spaces more functional. I spent 2 hours measuring her bathroom, discussing her needs, and sketching preliminary designs. When I presented my ideas, grab bars disguised as decorative elements, a walk-in shower with built-in seating, slip-resistant flooring that still looked elegant, she started crying. You actually listened to what I needed, she said, wiping her eyes. The other contractors just wanted to sell me the most expensive options. The project took 3 weeks. I worked carefully, treating her home like it was my own. When it was finished, Eleanor walked into her new bathroom and cried again. You're going to do great things, young man, she said, writing out my check. Mark my words. That night, my phone buzzed with a new email. Then another. Eleanor had posted photos of her bathroom renovation on Facebook, and suddenly I had 3 new project inquiries. Word of mouth, it turned out, was more powerful than any marketing campaign I could have afforded. Within a week, I had enough work to keep me busy for the next 3 months. I was pricing materials for my 4th project when my phone rang. Melissa's name flashed on the screen, and I almost didn't answer. Hello, Melissa. Jake? Hi. I heard you're doing construction stuff? Design and construction, yes. Why are you calling? There was a pause, like she was trying to figure out what to say. No particular reason. Just checking to make sure you're still alive. You know, since you disappeared without telling anyone where you were going. I almost laughed. She'd watched me pack and leave. She'd told me not to expect her to wait. I'm alive. Busy, actually. Busy with what? I mean, how many bathroom renovations can you really do? The condescension was still there, just wrapped in fake concern. More than you might think. Another pause. Well, don't get your hopes up too high. Most small businesses fail within the first year. Statistically speaking. Thanks for the encouragement. I'm just being realistic. Someone has to be. She laughed before hanging up, that same dismissive sound that had haunted me for years. But this time, it didn't hurt. This time, I had 3 clients who valued my work and 5 more consultations scheduled for next week. 6 months after leaving Melissa, my life had completely changed. Word about my work had spread through social media after a local home improvement blogger featured Eleanor's bathroom renovation. The article called my design approach innovative and thoughtfully accessible. Within hours of publication, my phone started ringing with new client requests. I'd moved out of Owen's garage and into a small office space downtown. Nothing fancy, just 2 rooms above a coffee shop, but it had a proper address and enough space for a drafting table. The work was challenging and satisfying in ways my old job never was. Every project was different, every client had unique needs, and I was building something that was entirely mine. My calendar was now booked 6 months out. I'd hired my first employee, a recent architecture graduate named Sophie, who shared my passion for sustainable design. We worked well together, and having another set of eyes on projects had elevated the quality of our work. Monroe Design and Build was no longer just a folder on my laptop. It was a real business with real employees and real revenue. That evening, I called Owen to update him on my progress. Man, I told you this would work out, he said. You want to grab dinner to celebrate? Can't tonight. I'm meeting with a potential commercial client. They want to discuss a major renovation project. The words felt surreal coming out of my mouth. The commercial client turned out to be Harrison Development, one of the largest construction firms in the city. They were interested in my sustainable building concepts for a new residential complex. We've been following your work, Monroe, said Tom Harrison, the company president. Your approach to energy-efficient design is exactly what our clients are asking for. I sat in their glass conference room, trying not to think about how different this was from Melissa's dismissive laughter just months earlier. We'd like to offer you an exclusive partnership on our next 3 projects, Harrison continued. The contracts would total approximately $2.3 million over 18 months. I kept my expression calm and professional, but inside I was reeling. This was more money than I'd made in my entire previous career. What would the partnership entail? I asked. You'd handle all sustainable design elements, solar integration, energy-efficient systems, eco-friendly materials. We'd handle the basic construction and project management. It was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about when I first started the business. I'm very interested, I said. When would you need a decision? Take your time. But we're hoping to announce our new sustainability initiative next month, with Monroe Design and Build as our featured partner. I shook hands with Tom Harrison and walked out of their building feeling like I was floating. The partnership with Harrison Development required more space and staff, so I found a proper office building with a showroom where clients could see examples of my work. The sign installation was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. Monroe Design and Build, LLC, in brushed steel letters across the front window. I stood on the sidewalk watching the workers position each letter, thinking about how far I'd come since that night in Owen's garage. Sophie joined me outside, holding 2 cups of coffee from the shop next door. "It looks official now," she said. "It feels official." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Saw your new office on Harrison Development's Instagram. Impressive. M." Melissa had found out about the partnership, probably through her father's business connections. I deleted the text without responding and went back inside to work. The showroom featured before and after photos of my projects, sustainable material samples, and 3D models of future designs. Everything was clean, professional, and completely mine. That afternoon, a journalist from the business magazine called to schedule an interview about young entrepreneurs disrupting traditional industries. I'd gone from being someone Melissa was embarrassed to introduce to someone magazines wanted to profile. The irony wasn't lost on me. The news reached me through Owen, who'd heard it from his wife Maria, who'd heard it from her sister, who worked at Harold's consulting firm. Melissa got laid off, Owen told me over lunch. Apparently her dad's company is downsizing. I chewed my sandwich thoughtfully. Part of me felt satisfied. Karma had a way of working things out. But mostly, I just felt nothing. How's she taking it? Maria says she's pretty shaken up. Been job hunting for a few weeks with no luck. I nodded and changed the subject to my upcoming magazine interview. Later that day, I received an email forwarded by mistake from Melissa's friend. "Can you believe Jake is some big shot contractor now? Melissa must be kicking herself. She always said he'd never amount to anything, and now he's got his face on magazine covers." Meanwhile, she can't even get an interview anywhere. Karma's a bitch, right? I read it twice, then deleted it. Success, I was learning, was its own revenge. I didn't need to gloat or rub Melissa's face in my achievements. The fact that they existed was enough. Still, there was something poetic about the timing of her unemployment coinciding with my biggest career breakthrough. The Greater Metro Business Association's monthly networking event was held at the downtown Marriott. I'd been invited as a featured member, a far cry from the early days when I couldn't afford to attend these gatherings. I was talking with a group of architects about sustainable building trends when I saw her across the room. Melissa stood near the registration table, wearing a navy dress I'd never seen before. She had a name tag that read Event Coordinator and was directing people toward the cocktail reception. She was working the event. Our eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and I watched her face change from professional politeness to shock. "Excuse me," I told the architects and walked toward her. "Jake?" she said, like she couldn't believe I was real. "Hello, Melissa." She looked around nervously, probably hoping none of her former colleagues would notice her working while I attended as a guest. I'm just helping out with this event. Temporary work, you know, between opportunities." "I see." Before either of us could say more, the event coordinator approached us. "Mr. Monroe, we're ready for you. The audience is excited to hear from tonight's keynote speaker." Melissa's face went white. "Keynote speaker?" she whispered. I straightened my tie and smiled. "Duty calls." Standing behind the podium, looking out at 200 business leaders, I felt completely calm. This was my world now. 5 years ago, I was working for someone else's company, building someone else's dreams. I began. Tonight, I want to talk about what happens when you stop waiting for permission to succeed. The presentation covered my business philosophy, the importance of sustainable construction practices, and the growth potential in eco-friendly building design. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions about market trends and implementation strategies. When I finished, the applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Several people approached me afterward with business cards and project inquiries. From the back of the room, I could see Melissa watching silently. She was still wearing her event coordinator name tag, still directing people toward the exit, but her attention was completely focused on me. A reporter from the Business Journal interviewed me near the bar. "What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs just starting out?" she asked. Don't let other people's limitations become your own, I replied, thinking about every time Melissa had told me to be realistic. After the interview, I was heading to my car when Melissa appeared beside me in the parking lot. Jake, can we talk? I stopped walking. About what? About this. About how things ended between us. I looked at her for a long moment, remembering the woman I'd once loved. Melissa and I sat in my truck in the parking lot while other event attendees drove away around us. She'd asked to talk, but now she seemed to be struggling to find words. I had no idea you were doing so well, she finally said. You weren't supposed to. You made it clear you weren't interested in my career. That's not fair, isn't it? You laughed at me, Melissa. You recorded me on your phone and mocked me to your parents. She looked down at her hands. I was scared. Of what? Of you failing. Of us losing everything. My dad always said entrepreneurship was too risky for people like us. People like us? People without trust funds or family businesses to fall back on. I understood then that her cruelty hadn't come from malice, but from fear. She'd been so terrified of instability that she'd chosen to destroy my confidence rather than risk supporting my dreams. So you decided to kill my ambition instead? I thought I was protecting us. Protecting you from disappointment. We sat in silence for a moment. I heard your company is struggling, I said. Dad's firm? Yeah. The market's been tough. Actually, I meant your employment situation. Her face flushed. Oh, that. I'd been thinking about this conversation for weeks. Ever since I'd learned about her job loss. An idea had been forming in my mind, one that might benefit both of us. 2 weeks later, I sat in the conference room of Preston and Associates, the consulting firm where Melissa had been working temporary jobs since her layoff. Your offer is very generous, Mr. Monroe, said William Preston, the managing partner. But I have to ask why you're interested in acquiring our firm. The truth was complicated. Preston and Associates handled project management for mid-sized construction contracts, exactly the kind of work Monroe design and build needed as we expanded. But there was also something satisfying about buying the company that had refused to hire Melissa permanently. Your client base aligns well with our growth strategy, I explained. We're looking to offer comprehensive design and project management services. Preston nodded. The integration would certainly benefit both companies. We spent 2 hours discussing terms, staff retention, and timeline. By the end of the meeting, we'd agreed on a purchase price and transition schedule. What about current employees? Preston asked. Will you be retaining our staff? Most of them, yes. I'll want to interview everyone individually to determine the best fit for our combined organization, including Melissa, though I didn't mention that specifically. The paperwork would take a few weeks to finalize, but Preston and Associates was about to become part of Monroe Design and Build. I drove home that evening thinking about how much my life had changed since that night I'd walked out of my marriage. Now I own the company where my ex-wife was desperately seeking employment. The acquisition announcement was scheduled for a Monday morning. I arrived at Preston and Associates at 9 a.m. sharp, wearing my best suit and carrying a briefcase full of new employee contracts. The entire staff was gathered in their main conference room, looking nervous about the sudden mandatory meeting. Good morning, everyone, William Preston began. I have some important news to share about our company's future. I watched the faces around the table, noting who looked worried and who seemed curious. Melissa sat near the back, still wearing the same professional mask she'd perfected over the years. Preston and Associates has been acquired by Monroe Design and Build, Preston continued. The transition will be smooth, with most of our current staff being retained under new management. Murmurs rippled around the room. I'd like to introduce your new CEO, Jake Monroe. I stood up and walked to the front of the room. Every head turned toward me, but only one pair of eyes showed recognition. Melissa had gone completely pale. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jake Monroe, and I'm excited about the opportunities this acquisition will create for all of us. I'd practiced this speech, focusing on integration plans and growth projections. But the whole time I spoke, I was watching Melissa's face process the reality of her situation. Her ex-husband was now her boss. After the general meeting, I conducted individual interviews with each employee to discuss their role in the merged company. Melissa was scheduled last at 4 p.m. She knocked on the conference room door exactly on time, carrying a folder that probably contained her resume and references. Please sit down, I said, gesturing to the chair across from me. She sat stiffly, avoiding eye contact. So, I continued, looking at her file. You've been working here as a temporary project coordinator for the past 6 weeks. Yes. Before that, you were unemployed for 4 months. I was between opportunities. I made a note in her file. Your education and experience are solid. MBA from State, 5 years in consulting. You understand project timelines and client management. Thank you. I have a position that might be perfect for you. For the first time since I'd started talking, she looked directly at me. What position? Front desk coordinator. You'd handle client intake, schedule appointments, manage our reception area. You're detail-oriented and professional. You'd be the first person clients see when they come in. Her jaw dropped slightly. Front desk. The salary is competitive for that level of responsibility. Jake, you can't be serious. I'm completely serious. It's a good job with a growing company. I have an MBA, and now you have an opportunity to use it in a customer service role. She stared at me for a long moment, probably realizing that this was the only job offer she was likely to get. Melissa's first day at the front desk was a Tuesday in October, exactly 1 year after I'd walked out of our house with my resignation letter. She arrived 15 minutes early, wearing a conservative business suit and carrying a coffee that had probably cost more than I used to spend on lunch. I gave her a brief tour of the office, showing her the phone system, client database, and appointment scheduling software. You'll be the face of Monroe Design and Build, I explained. First impressions matter. I understand. Sophie will help you learn our project management system. Most of our clients prefer to schedule consultations in advance, but we do take walk-ins. Melissa nodded, taking notes in a small notebook. Any questions? Just one. Why are you doing this? I looked at her sitting behind the reception desk in the building I owned, working for the company I'd built from nothing. You said I'd never get a single client, I replied. I thought you might want to meet some of them. The phone rang, and she automatically reached for it. Monroe Design and Build, this is Melissa. How can I help you? Her professional phone voice was perfect. She scheduled 3 consultations and took detailed messages for 2 potential commercial clients. When I walked past the front desk later that afternoon, she was typing up client notes and looked completely absorbed in the work. Everything going okay? I asked. She nodded without looking up. Fine. Just adjusting. 6 months after Melissa started working at my company, Monroe Design and Build had expanded again. We'd moved to a larger building, hired 8 new employees, and were featured on the cover of Regional Business magazine. I kept the magazine in my office, not out of ego, but as a reminder of how far I'd traveled from that night in Owen's garage. The article called my company a rising star in sustainable construction and mentioned our innovative approach to eco-friendly building design. I was reading through the piece when Sophie knocked on my office door. Jake, there's someone here to see you. Do I have an appointment? No, but she says it's personal. It's Melissa. I looked through my office window toward the front desk. A temporary receptionist was covering for Melissa, who was standing uncertainly by my door. Send her in. Melissa entered my office slowly, like she was afraid of disturbing something. She'd been working here for months, but she'd never come to my personal office. What can I do for you? I wanted to talk to you about something. Privately. Okay. She sat down across from my desk, in the same chair where I now interviewed potential clients for million-dollar projects. I've been thinking about things. About us. About how everything happened. I waited for her to continue. You were right to leave me, she said quietly. And I was wrong about everything. I was wrong about your business, Melissa continued. Wrong about your abilities. Wrong about what you were capable of achieving. I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. This was the first time she'd ever admitted being wrong about anything. Why are you telling me this now? Because working here, seeing what you've built, meeting your clients. I finally understand what I couldn't see before, which is that my fear of failure made me want to destroy your confidence instead of supporting your dreams. She looked around my office, at the awards on the wall, the architectural models on my shelves, the city view from my window. I was so afraid of losing our comfortable life that I tried to keep you trapped in it with me. And now I see that you were never going to be happy building other people's dreams. You needed to build your own. I appreciated her honesty, but it was years too late. I'm glad you understand now, I said. But it doesn't change what happened between us. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness or another chance. I just wanted you to know that I see it clearly now. She stood up to leave, then turned back at the door. For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even if I don't have the right to be proud of you anymore. After she left, I sat alone in my office for a long time, thinking about the woman I'd married and the woman she'd become. 3 months later, Melissa submitted her resignation letter. I've been offered a position with a nonprofit organization, she explained during our exit interview. It's more in line with my education and experience. I'm happy for you. Thank you. And thank you for giving me a job when I needed one. I know it probably wasn't easy, considering our history. It was just business. She smiled sadly. No, it wasn't. But I deserved it. Monroe Design and Build continued growing after Melissa left. We opened a second location, partnered with 3 more development firms, and were invited to present at the National Sustainable Building Conference. The business I'd started in Owen's garage now employed 32 people and had completed over 200 projects. Success had become normal, which was strange after years of being told I'd never amount to anything. But the sweetest part wasn't the money or recognition or magazine covers. The sweetest part was proving to myself that Melissa's opinion of my limitations had never been the truth. I'd built something great, just not with the person I'd originally planned to share it with. Her laughter that night had been the catalyst I needed to finally stop seeking her approval and start building my own life. Today, I walk through the bustling offices of Monroe Design and Build, watching my employees work on projects that will change how people think about sustainable construction. Sophie is now my partner and head of design. Owen quit his day job to become our project manager. The company has grown beyond anything I imagined when I first created that folder on my laptop. But success isn't just about the business metrics. It's about the satisfaction of knowing that every client we serve gets our absolute best work. It's about creating jobs for talented people who share my vision. It's about proving that sustainable building isn't just possible, it's profitable. I paused at the front desk, where our new receptionist was scheduling consultations for next month. The calendar was completely booked. She laughed when I said I'd build something great. I said quietly, thinking about that night I'd walked out of my marriage. I did build it. I just didn't know I'd have to build it without her. I turned toward the camera I'd set up in my office, feeling calm and confident about the story I was ready to tell. Please subscribe, because sometimes the best revenge isn't proving them wrong about you. Sometimes the best revenge is proving yourself right. My name is Jake Monroe, and this is the story of how losing everything I thought I wanted helped me build everything I actually needed.